Big time banger. Coming up at middleweight this weekend, we have the Iron Turtle, Jun Yong Park, taking on Tafon Nchukwi. Matt, really interesting fight based on fight camps. I mean, for Nchukwi coming in here from Team Lloyd Irvin. And listen, we saw one of his teammates recently in Sadiq Yusuff coming out on the wrong end against a very well-rounded fighter in Arnold Allen. So he's looking to pick things back up for Lloyd Irvin and crew. And for Jun Yong Park, one of his teammates had a very, very successful outing here recently in Da Un Jung, who picked up a huge win over William Knight, former common opponent of Tafon Nchukwi. So if you look at it in this one, Jun Yong Park, very, very good striker. He can kind of sit behind his jab. He can really do a good job of finding his range early, and once he does, if he mixes in some of his takedowns, he can really find a lot of success. And if you want to go back and see a good Jun Yong Park fight, what's his last fight? He beat the absolute tar out of Wales' John Phillips. And yeah, was that kind of a bit of a staple, John Phillips' time in the UFC? Well, unless you're Alan Amidowski, yeah, kind of. But for Jun Yong Park, very, very good fight. I did listen to, and I kind of urge people to check it out. And I know, a friend of the show, it's JHK MMA, but he had a great interview with SCMP MMA with Jun Yong Park. They kind of talked about the preparations for this fight. They talked about the Phillips fight. And they kind of talked about the stylistic matchup with Tafon Nchukwi. And what I got out of it was, listen, he beat Phillips very bad, but he wanted to ground and pound him to get into a submission. And the exact quotable was, I still lack submission skills, need to work on my ground and pound skills. I didn't love hearing that. He also kind of talked about the fact that Tafon Nchukwi, is he good defensively with his grappling and his wrestling? Sure he is. Is he very offensive with his takedowns and with his submission abilities? Not so much. So really, both of these guys are fairly similar as far as their strikers. They're defensively quite sound. Offensively, maybe not the best. And for Tafon Nchukwi, I mean, this is a guy that had a pro Muay Thai career. He went 13-1 in Muay Thai, quite a bit of kickboxing. And when he was on Dana White's Contender Series and got that big win, Dana White had the Mike Tyson comparison for MMA. Pretty lofty stuff there.
Yeah, you can calm down on those comparisons just now. He's kind of like Mike Goldberg comparing, who was it?
Travis Lutter.
Yeah, Travis Lutter to GSP and all those. It's an odd comparison, a very early one to make it that. But Tafon Nchukwi is a very exciting prospect at middleweight with a record of only 5-0. And he is one of those fighters who, I'm going to bring up Carlos Alberg for all of 2 seconds, but he's one of those fighters who their MMA record is somewhat deceiving because you do know that their level of experience, especially in combat sports, is a lot more extensive than just what their MMA record looks like. Yes, he only has the 5 professional MMA fights, but like you had mentioned, he has an extensive background in Muay Thai and striking. So for Nchukwi, he is such a high-level striker that it will be interesting in this fight because for Jun Yong Park, I'll be honest, I don't ever have the best read on him because he is a good striker, don't get me wrong, but in my mind, his wrestling's terrible. I understand it's not, I really do, but in my mind, the fact that he took down John Phillips that many times wasn't that impressive. What he did to Marc-Andre Barriault was much more impressive though, and I know I've been probably way too hard on Barriault on this channel, but beating Barriault is a much more impressive opponent to go out there and really manhandle than going out there and beating a guy like John Phillips, because Barriault's a guy who's been in there with top-level fighters. Like we were just talking about Christophe Jocko last week, and he had a really close fight with Jocko, so it kind of tells you what level Barriault can at least get to on his best day. And for Park to go out there and really mix up his wrestling with his striking in that regard, I thought that was an impressive performance, and I do really think we're going to see that same, at least game plan out of Park in this fight. I expect him to try to overwhelm Nchukwi with his volume, and then shoot him for a lot of takedowns, because if you're Park and you're just trying to fight on the outside, you're going to get leg kicked, you're probably going to get outmatched with the power, and if you do start to get backed up, I can see Nchukwi landing with big power, especially if he's throwing in combinations. But for Park, again, if he can just throw his hands so much, almost like we kind of saw with Sterling with Petr Yan, where I'm just throwing my punches so you're not reacting back and you're covering up, I think that could be a good game plan for Park, but I do see this being a very fun fight.
Which is the funny thing, because when we previewed Tafon Nchukwi, I went back and watched it, and the Jamie Pickett fight, it was like, okay, well, Pickett, when he has success, and you did see it in that fight against Jonathan Paty over on Dana White's Contender Series, what did he do? He blitzed forward, he did the old Andrei Arlovsky, kind of threw his arms out there, and he went insane. It was like a 30-punch combo, finished him, looked great. How do you beat Tafon Nchukwi? Well, he kind of struggles with the pressure and the volume. So, if you do think Jun Yong Park's going to get the win, for Park, that's probably the way. And if you see it, you look at it. When he fought John Phillips, he outstruck him in total strikes, 260-13. Had 13 minutes of control time, and the scores, 30-26. 30-25, 30-25, 30-25. He beat the brakes off of him. For Tafon Nchukwi, you go back and you look at his last fight, the Jamie Pickett fight, where, okay, how good's Tafon Nchukwi? How much can he mix things in? Because if you do go back, I mean, Jamie Pickett got a takedown in that one. The scores, 30-25, 30-26, 30-26, 159-40 were the total strikes. Nchukwi dropped them. Like, he fought a great fight too. So both of these guys are coming off of very important wins.
Because here's the thing with Nchukwi. Here's the added X factor, and Joe Rogan would hate this. For being a guy who's as heavily muscled as he is, he actually has pretty good cardio and a really good level of output to go along with it. Because here's the thing. People have to start judging cardio by how many minutes a person can last before they look tired. I judge cardio a lot more by a person's ability to throw output in a fight and to at least sustain a certain level of output. Like Paulo Costa, does he have bad cardio? Well, not at all. If you can throw 250 strikes in a 3-round fight, then you have good output. You just kind of have to figure out where your output, or you have good cardio, so you just have to sort of level out your output during the fight. With Nchukwi, he does have decent cardio for these sizes, so I do think even if he is on the receiving end of one of those grueling style matchups that Park's going to bring out, even if he is kind of wilting under some of the pressure, if he is defending takedowns, I'm not that worried about his power bar really leveling off in that second and third round. I do think that he can still make this fight somewhat competitive in that second and third round as the fight progresses, but it will be interesting because Park really can use his pace as a weapon in this fight, but if you're constantly moving forward on a guy like Tafon, you're going to be in that danger zone of his big power shots.
If you look at the odds, Jun Yong Park opened a plus 160. He's now at a plus 118 or thereabouts, which again, I do find pretty neat. And if you look at Tafon Nchukwi, open minus 185. He's now at a minus 143. If we have a look at the Tapology votes, a little bit of a surprise. 913 votes so far, 79% Nchukwi, 73% by knockout. And again, both of these guys had very impressive performances their last time out. For Tafon Nchukwi, he was making his UFC debut, taking on Pickett, and that was back in December. For Jun Yong Park, when he took on John Phillips, that last fight was back in October. Before that, Marc-Andre Barrio, which was December of 2019. And before that, he lost his UFC debut. He was coming in, took on Fluffy Hernandez. But sometimes Anthony Hernandez is going to submit guys. And listen, that's just what happened in that one. The thing that I like out of this, again, for Nchukwi, he's training out of Team Lloyd Irvin. There's a lot of good training partners there. We don't have to go through it too much. But for Jun Yong Park, I talked about it. Da Un Jung's another guy, especially in the weight classes 185 and above. And I was going through it. Hyo Jun Lee, he took on, or he has Sung Jun Lee there as well. And Dong Gi Yang, a guy that you never hear about anymore, but UFC vet, the Ox. And that guy, I get it just from the nickname. Big, strong fighter that can take fights to the mat. I think that's somebody that you can train with quite a bit. And I know, listen, he's up in his later 30s, but still, somebody, a body to have in the gym. And if you're going to get pushed, that's a great guy to have. So overall, I see this fight as being very, very close, and I think the odds kind of reflect that just based on where they're at right now.
Oh yeah, this is going to be one of those one-way traffic fights. I really do think so. Now, I know we talked a lot about the striking of Park, but if Park's going to win this fight, he has to get the takedown. I really don't think he can just stand on the feet with Tafon Nchukwi throughout this fight and not expect to get at least dropped one time, because Tafon doesn't only have that level of power, he's really fast too. And at the end of the day, when you're fighting a high-level striker like him, you're going to have to make it an MMA fight. You can't just stand on the outside. So for Park, I actually think stylistically he does have at least a skill set that will challenge Tafon, and he should be able to secure at least one takedown throughout this fight. But I do see this being either Park's going to go out there, get one takedown, just control him for the whole round, then he gets it, and then rinse and repeat, or Nchukwi knocks him out somewhat early on, or maybe later on the fight goes on. I'm going to ever so slightly side with Tafon Nchukwi in this fight. I do think with the combination of his leg kicks and his overall output, if he can just keep Park at range for some of this fight and keep his own back off the cage, I do think that with his stand-up, he will be able to get some power shots off, and that will really diminish Park as this fight progresses. I'm not going to say it gets a finish, but I do think Tafon will win this one.
When I went back in the tape study getting ready for this, I watched all of those Tafon Nchukwi fights. So if you go through it, against Alex Myers attempted 8 takedowns. He got none of them. A.T. McCowan wasn't able to do a whole lot. William Knight went 0 for 5 in one round. Then he took on Almadavao, who was way too small. He was just a tiny little guy, and he absolutely pieced him up in the 2 rounds. And then he took on Jamie Pickett, and it was a pillar-to-post win. Tafon Nchukwi, great fighter. For Jun Yong Park, he has all of the experience, though, in MMA. Yes. And you look at some of the fights, the fight against Glenn Sparv coming in or, on the regional scene. He also has a submission win over PFL Sweetheart and welterweight king Ray Cooper III. And he has a loss by submission to Shavkat Rakhmonov. Stuff like that's just going to happen. I like Jun Yong Park in this fight. Again, I think if he can pressure in the volume, mix in his whole attack, I think Korean Top Team is going to get a win here. So I like Park You got Tafon Nchukwi. Sometimes we disagree, but like I said, and I think we both agree on this one, it's such a close fight to call, so I can't wait to hear what people are thinking about this one. Down below in the comments section, let us know. Are you going with Didon? Or are you going with the Iron Turtle to get the win? I've got Jun Yong Park. You got Tafon Nchukwi. Overall, great card. Co-main event. Donald Cowboy Cerrone's taking on Alex Morono. And in the main event, we have Marina Rodriguez taking on Michelle Waterson. So you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, let's get into it.